listening to Boxing Vibes TV News with JD, the only place for the latest and greatest news in the sport of boxing.
BVTV News, and I'm back to give y'all the latest and greatest news in the sport of boxing. With that being said, if this is your first time on the channel, I would like to invite y'all to hit that subscribe button as well as that notification bell so that you are updated on our latest drops here on the channel. Now, with that being said, man, let's talk a little bit about the new signee to Mr. Eddie Hearn, Jaron Boots Ennis, and him now being a part of Matchroom Boxing. So recently, Eddie Hearn made this signing, and let's listen to some comments that he made regarding the Jaron Boots Ennis versus Terence Bud Crawford talk that's been swirling, the internet as
pound for pound now. We've got to get him in the fights. We've got to get him undisputed at 47. He can move up. I want to see him fight Terence Crawford. That's a fight that's been talked about, and Terence will only take that fight if he's big enough. Terence will only take that fight if he's big enough.
So when you listen to Eddie Hearn, it's very interesting because we've been hearing online a lot about Bud versus Boots. And it appears that even Eddie Hearn knows that as of right now, when you hear him say something like Terence Bud Crawford will do the fight if, and that's a big if Boots is big enough, it's because Eddie Hearn knows that at this particular point that Boots Ennis is not quite at a level yet where he would make a lucrative fight for Terence Bud Crawford. And everybody knows, like, if you're really coming at this with real, common sense, you would understand that right now, the money is just not there for a massive Terence Bud Crawford bout versus Jaron Boots Ennis. And here's the reason why. What a lot of people, kind of don't really, understand of the business side of everything is when two fighters decide to get into the ring, many times there's two options that are on the table that these fighters can approach their money with, right? On option A would be for both of you all to go into a pay-per-view bout, not really worry about a guarantee, and you're just going to take, a swing at possibly promoting the fight, and y'all will split the pay-per-view revenue. So you're going to take a lower guarantee, but you're going to hope that the back end is massive if you all promote the fight very well, and you end up making a lot of money in return. Or you have the other option, which is typically what most fighters, do, and this is option B, where you have to have investors who are willing to pony up the guarantees first. And then you end up fighting and you do the pay-per-view and you maybe even get a cut of the pay-per-view after that. So the reality of the scenario right now with Jaron Boots Ennis and Terence Bud Crawford, and Eddie Hearn knows this, is that right now there's not any investors that are willing to offer up Bud Crawford the guarantee that he needs to get into the ring with Jaron Boots Ennis. Now, where this all gets interesting is because we know that Eddie Hearn has ties over there to now the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Turkey Al-Sheikh, right? So it could potentially be a move for Eddie Hearn where you would take Jaron Boots Ennis, put him in the ring with a Conor Benn, and then maybe try to do a few other fights and try to build up that name. Because I'm going to keep it real. One of the real things about this signing, though, is Eddie Hearn really doesn't have any fighters of note other than a Conor Benn. And most people, let's be real, we feel like Boots is light years ahead of a Conor Benn. But then even with Conor Benn, you got a scenario where he still might not be able to fight over in the UK. Because if you do Jaron Boots versus Conor Benn to kind of build up Boots' profile, that has to go down in another country. You don't need to bring Boots and Conor Benn over to Philadelphia or America. Like that's just not going to be best for Jaron Boots Ennis. You're trying to boost his profile so that you can start to get him in the biggest fights possible. So when you go beyond Conor Benn, it even looks like at the 147-pound division and 154, there's not many notable names that would really be out there for Jaron Boots Ennis. So, as of right now, you also have Eddie Hearn, who is talking about bringing him back to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, I'm going to keep it real with y'all, man. I believe that Boots will end up becoming top pound for pound or be right there at the top. But that is another admission, undercover by Eddie Hearn, that he knows that Boots' profile is not quite there yet where it demands top dollar, right? Because when you have a promoter who is still discussing doing hometown fights and trying to get the hometown base behind the fighter, I'm going to be real. That tells you that that fighter is not yet at that status globally and, widespread as far as being a star. When you're still going back to the first step of doing the massive hometown Philadelphia bouts, it means that Eddie Hearn, who's been in this game for a long, long time and knows how to build fighters up, knows that, hey, we got to go back to the fundamentals. We got to get him rooted in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, get that fan base behind him, and then we've got to maneuver him maybe with Conor Benn over to the UK. And we've got to maneuver. Then, if we build him up, in maybe about a year or so, it would demand that top dollar from investors. Remember, this money has to come from somewhere, right? So if you're talking about a Boots Ennis versus Terence Crawford fight right now today, in 2024, there is no money for it. Right now, that fight would have to occur somewhere here in the United States of America, probably would have to occur in Las Vegas, and you would have to depend mostly on just an American fan base to probably support that bout. It wouldn't necessarily be an international bout where you're going to get lots of money from other markets. That's just the reality of it. So that is why you have a Terence Crawford who is looking over at fighters like a Canelo Alvarez or fighters like a Tim Tszyu, or possibly entertaining going over to the UK and facing off against a Chris Eubank Jr. at 160. Because even though many people feel like Boots is more talented than a Chris Eubank, etc., the reality is if you go over to the UK, the money becomes much bigger because you're now incorporating a fighter with the whole fan base of another country. So when you really look at the real money aspects of the bout, while it's a tremendous bout between Terence Crawford and Boots Ennis, and a lot of people would love to see it, the reality is with these two fighters right now, the money here in the U.S. is not there. It's simply not there. And what people have to realize is that when it comes to an investor's standpoint, right? When it comes to a true investor standpoint, it's one thing for 20,000 people to be on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, X, you name it, clamoring for a bout, right? You can look at the analytics and see that, 20,000 people, Boots versus Bud, Boots versus Bud, Bud need to fight Boots. You can see all that, right? But the reality is that doesn't necessarily equate to 400,000, 500,000 pay-per-view buys. And that is what investors are looking at when it comes to ponying up the guaranteed purses for these fighters to get into the ring. They're not going off the analytics of 23,000 hashtags and people saying that fight should happen. They're looking at the numbers and, okay, what is the likelihood if I go guarantee this fighter $10 million, $20 million to get in the ring, which is what these fighters deserve for that bout, right? What is the likelihood that the fans out there's going to be enough of them that are going to purchase the pay-per-view, right? And I end up recuperating my money. It becomes pure math at a particular point. So I understand the public wanting this bout, but you see where even Eddie Hearn, in his recent signing of Jaron Boots Ennis, understands that Boots is not just yet at a level where investors are going to invest the right money in a Boots versus Bud fight to make it happen. Right now, if that fight were to happen, let's be honest here, it only benefits Jaron Boots Ennis, right? Jaron Boots Ennis has probably another decade of his career to go to get massive paydays. He's only about 27 years of age. So he's got a whole nother decade to secure his family with massive paydays. You got a Terence Bud Crawford who's about 37 and looking at his last paydays. So, of course, this bout would only benefit Boots because Boots will probably take this fight for minimal to no money just for the opportunity to defeat Crawford. Or even if you don't defeat him, if you look excellent and you look amazing in the bout, everybody will know that Boots is still coming. So my prediction is that when it's all said and done, you are going to see that fight. If it ever does happen, it would happen at 154. Because some people wonder, well, why doesn't Terence Bud Crawford fight him if he's got all of the belts at 147? Well, the reason why Terence Bud Crawford is holding on to the belts, in my opinion, just my humble opinion, is because of the things that he's trying to do against boxing politics, right? The whole reason why he's holding on to the belts is so that he can make moves like the WBO move with the whole Sebastian Fundora situation. You have a scenario where they're about to have Errol Spence Jr. jump the line, but because he is the 147-pound champ at 147, he's able to be super champion and he can navigate getting to that 154-pound WBO belt. So I believe once Terence Crawford can get the right path into 154, I personally believe that he will probably vacate all of those 147-pound straps. The only other way that Terence Bud Crawford will end up going through and defending those belts and fighting a Boots Ennis would be if Eddie Hearn can somehow right now in 2024 convince Mr. Turki Al-Sheikh in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to invest enough money in Boots versus Bud right now. And so right now, that's really what it all boils down to. The money is not there right now from investors. They would not believe that they would be able to recoup that money based off of the earning power of a Boots and a Bud together. They just don't see them recouping the money. So regardless of what everybody's saying online, I mean, they're going off the analytics that they see. Now, the only other play would be if you attach Boots and Bud to, let's say, an Anthony Joshua fight, right? Now, maybe if, Turki Al-Sheikh decided to do AJ versus Parker 2 or another AJ bout and then attach Bud and Boots to it, okay, then that's a fight that would do the pay-per-view numbers you're looking for. But if you try to put AJ and Crawford on the same card, that's really coming out a lot of money. So a lot of this, I'm going to keep it real with y'all, for us to end up seeing Boots versus Bud, the reality of it is two options. Either Turki Al-Sheikh comes up with the money for Terence Bud Crawford, or we have to sit back and allow Eddie Hearn to build up the profile for a Jaron Boots Ennis to a point where more than just our U.S. market of certain fans are wanting that bout. You got to get him in some other countries, get some hype and some buzz, get Bud over there against Chris Eubank or somebody else, build up more Bud. You got to do a few other things for that fight to truly make sense for Terence Crawford. We know it makes sense regardless for Boots Ennis because he's the young stud on the come up. But for it to make sense for Terence Crawford, man, a lot of other things have to happen. But y'all let me know what y'all think in the comment section. This is JD at BBTV News. I'm going to keep giving y'all the latest and greatest news in the sport of boxing. Until next time, please make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so that you are updated. Let me know what you think in the comments, man, about Boots and Bud. And will there ever be an investor? Because remember, this is all about the money. Will there be somebody out there soon in the immediate future who's really going to pony up the dough for both of them to really get in the ring? Let me know what you think in the comments. Till next time, deuces.